Welcome back, everybody, to the Philadelphia Eagles franchise here on Madden 22. Today, we're going to kick off the season number 4 offseason as we start with free agency. This is a big opportunity for us to acquire some veterans and make this team better for the immediate future, even if it takes a dent in our bank account. Before the offseason, I like to give my subscribers an opportunity to make an input on what we should do. So they're pretty much the owner, giving me, the GM, a list of objectives. If you would like an opportunity to do something like this in the future, make sure to go join my Discord. Link is in the description, where you can help everybody figure out what we should do for the offseason. So this is the list that we have come up with. We have 4 objectives. Number 1, focus on the trenches. Get younger and better on the offensive and defensive lines. I think those were our weak spots last year, and we have a lot of older players there. Health matters. Prioritize non-injury prone players. We were really hit by the injury bug this past season, so focus on guys who can be healthy. Add another weapon to the offense. Probably a tight end would make the most sense. We are pretty good at wide receiver and running back. Tight end is another weak link on our roster. And then number 4, make moves that can help us become true Super Bowl contenders this year, because I think our team is very close to winning a Super Bowl. We made the NFC Championship last year, so I think we're only a few pieces away from actually getting there. Being that we just lost in the NFC Championship and we were 1 win away from at least making the Super Bowl, I feel like this team is really close, and we could put the final pieces of the puzzle together this offseason to hopefully push us over the hump in becoming a Super Bowl team. So as we start with the offseason, we open up in the staff stage. This is where you can fire and hire new coaches. Around the NFL, there were 3 head coach firings. 2 of them I saw coming. 1 was a surprise. So the Seahawks and Falcons were both really bad. Atlanta obviously won 1 game. So Pete Carroll, who is older anyway, and Arthur Smith were expected. Sean McVay, not so much. The Giants had just hired Sean McVay last season, but they were a little bit disappointing. They were the only team to lose to Atlanta, which was right at the end of the year. So the Giants will have their 4th head coach in 5 years during this series. So let's look at the new hiring. Starting with the Atlanta Falcons, they just went 1-16. They're not a great team. They are going to have a harder time attracting big-name hires, so they went outside the box, going for Patrick Willis. Willis was not a coach anywhere prior or a coordinator, but he's a high-level leader who knows football well. He was very good for the San Francisco 49ers for upwards of a decade, and he's going to lead the culture shift in Atlanta. For the Seattle Seahawks, they're in a similar situation that the Falcons are in, but they landed a better hire, or at least a more prominent one, that being Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. So he will be coaching Capricus Falconbridge, a player who has some similarities to Josh Allen. I like the fit. I think they can work together. The big job, however, is the New York Football Giants, and they are getting Pep Hamilton, who was the offensive coordinator of the Steelers last year. Big reason for Bjorn Syverson's development, and even going back prior, big reason for guys like Justin Herbert, Davis Mills. So the Giants are really hoping he can do that for Anthony Cortez III in a head coaching role. Pep Hamilton was the big fish this offseason, and the Giants were the big landing spot. They're the best team of those 3. They have the best young quarterback of those 3. So there you go. Those are the new hirings. We are not making any changes. I like our staff the way it is. Nick Sirianni did good as the offensive coordinator. Bill Summers was really solid as our defensive coordinator after we fired Robert Saleh mid-season. And Summers came in and replaced him, and the defense was a lot better after that move. So as we move forward now, we move into the re-sign and retirement stage of the offseason. There are some big names calling a career included on our team. Zach Ertz and Fletcher Cox are 2 all-time Philadelphia legends who both were huge parts of this team for upwards of a decade, including staples on that Super Bowl 52 winning core, and it's fitting that they are retiring together. So let's talk about both of their careers because they were both very, very good ones. So Fletcher Cox was a first-round pick back in 2012, and he's been with the team since and has continued to play at a high level his entire career. He has taken a step down the past couple of years, but he's still been a high-level starter. 7-time Pro Bowl, multi-time All-Pro, and obviously one of the best players on a Super Bowl team. With a legacy score over 11,000, he's a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame. As for Zach Ertz, really the first move we made in this series was trading him to the Bengals for Akeem Davis-Gaither, a trade that ended up really working out for us even though Davis-Gaither is no longer on the roster. Ertz was an elite tight end. He was awesome in that Super Bowl game. He somehow has a lower legacy score than Eric Ebron. I don't get that at all. Ertz is a ring. Ertz has always been better than Eric Ebron, so I don't get that, but whatever. Jason Kelce not retiring is a surprise. He's 37 years old. I've been expecting him to retire pretty much every year at this point. but he is still sticking around. Some other notable players include former Eagle Darius Slay, Von Miller, Julio Jones, Terran Armstead, Lane Johnson, another Philadelphia legend who has spent his whole career with the Eagles except this past year in Carolina where he allowed 14 sacks. With a legacy score over 10,000, he should also be a Hall of Famer. I think all three of those guys, Ertz, Cox, and Lane Johnson, are certainly going to get their jerseys retired. And then a bunch of other guys in here, including Colin Kaepernick. And then as we scroll towards the bottom, Nick Foles is going to be retiring. It's perfect that he retired as an Eagle. We signed him right before the NFC Championship game. Obviously, we lost. But it's fitting he retires here because, obviously, he's the main reason why the Eagles won that Super Bowl MVP. Even though he wasn't as good of a player as, say, Zach Ertz or Fletcher Cox or Lane Johnson, he will always be immortalized in Philadelphia sports history. So shout out to Nick Foles, Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox, Zach Ertz, hell, even Darius Slay. He had a number of good seasons with us before being traded to the Vikings, a trade that really worked out for us because we got Tazwell Hubbard out of it. You may have noticed that Tom Brady did not retire. He is sticking in the league for another year at 48 years old. The reigning MVP and Super Bowl MVP has another one in him as he looks for ring number 9. He threw for 6,000 yards last year, so there's no reason to suggest that he's slowing down really anytime soon. So that wraps it up for retirements. We lost a lot of big-time players, and we could lose a lot more here in the re-sign phase, but we have plenty of money to spend. With $167 million in cap space, we have plenty of financial flexibility to do what we wish, not just here in the re-signings, but also throughout free agency as well. So obviously the big name here is wide receiver Devontae Smith. Are we going to pay him? Are we not going to pay him? I mean, it's not really a question. He's been arguably the best receiver in the NFL the past 4 years. He has missed some time in each of the past 2 seasons, but this year in the playoffs, he showed why he's a true #1 receiver. I was going to pay him regardless of what happened in the playoffs, but that sort of validated that we need to give him his money. We're just going to offer him what he wants. 4 years, $80.8 million. He accepts. So Devontae Smith sticking around for another 4 years. He is back. That brings us to Deshaun Elliott, who we signed in season number 1. Elliott has been really good, and he's improved in each and every season for us. He wants a lot of money, though, $13+ million. I was always planning on letting him go once we drafted Edmund Orient in the first round. But with how well Deshaun Elliott played this season, it became a lot harder of a decision. But after thinking about it, I don't really want to pay Deshaun Elliott $13 million. It's not that he's not worth it, but we have Edmund Orient, we have Joko Nwosu, we just don't need him, and I think we can use our money in a better spot. We're offering Eric Flowers a short-term deal. He says no. That brings us to Clelin Ferrell, who has been on the team the past 3 seasons and has been highly productive for our defense as a staple on the defensive line. And with Fletcher Cox gone, we're going to need him more than ever. So with that being said, Clelin Ferrell is definitely a player I would like to retain. He's asking for around $9 million over 3 years. I don't really want to do 3 years. He is already 28 years old, so we're going to do 2 years for a little bit more money. He accepts. So Clelin Ferrell is back on the team. Jason Kelce, I can't let him retire anywhere else. He's got to retire as a Philadelphia Eagle, and he's still a productive player. He is still at a very high level at 37 years old, so we're going to re-sign him on a 1-year deal. He is back. Bobby Wagner's 35 years old. He took a small step down this year, but was still really good. But I don't really think we need Bobby Wagner. We have Isaiah Simmons. We have Winston Johnson. We have Boob McAllister. We have Josh Uche, Hannibal Savage, Adrian Tibble. We are loaded at linebacker, and we've got a lot of young guys who are ready to play. Bobby Wagner is still good enough to be an NFL starter, but unfortunately it won't be on our team. Landon Dickerson, this is where things get fun. Dickerson is a quality starter, but he cannot stay on the field. He has an 84 injury rating. He's missed so much time throughout this series. He missed his entire rookie year with a torn ACL, which he suffered in college. He missed 3 games last year. He missed 4 regular season games this year and played a total of 9 snaps in the playoffs. He did not play in either of our 2 wins and got re-injured very early against the Bucs. So long story short, Landon Dickerson cannot stay on the field, and I think re-signing him would be a mistake because he gets injured seemingly every other play. So we're going to let him walk. Tim Settle wants around $6 million for 1 year. I'm not going to pay him that, even though Fletcher Cox did just retire. Boob McAllister is back. I don't really want him going anywhere because he's got that superstar X factor. Jason Johnson's a solid depth piece at guard, so he's going to come back. Eric Boyd is back. He's got star development, talented rotational pass rusher. And then other than that, I wanted to bring back Joe Manning. He's good depth. Actually got some snaps late towards the year. He's a good number 4 corner. And then I wanted to re-sign Corey Pierce by lowballing him because I don't really want to give him $3 million. But unfortunately, he says no. So overall, pretty good. We brought back Devontae Smith for big money. We also re-signed Cleveland Ferrell, Jason Kelsey, Boop McAllister, Jason Johnson, Eric Boyd, and Joe Manning. Everybody else, we either tried to re-sign and couldn't, or we will just be letting walk. A lot of great players here, including Landon Dickerson, Bobby Wagner, Deshaun Elliott. I'm going to miss these guys. I hope they do well in their next endeavors, but unfortunately, it won't be with us. So that brings us to free agency, and we have got plenty of money to spend, over $120 million, and there are some names in here. Aaron Donald headlines the list. You've also got David Bakhtiari, Jalen Waddle, obviously Deshaun Elliott, Trey Smith, Trayvon Merrick, Justin Simmons, a number of special teamers, Rondale Moore, Deontay Johnson, DJ Chark, Travis Etienne. This is a really, really good free agency class, and as I said, I wanted to spend big money. I wanted to make moves that put us in the position to win a Super Bowl next year, and I want to particularly focus on the offensive and defensive lines. So the first move we're going to make is for offensive guard Trey Smith. He instantly popped out at me. He's a really good young player and can be a focal point on the offensive line for a while. There's one problem with him, though. He has a 77 injury rating, which is even worse than Landon Dickerson's. So if you thought Landon Dickerson got hurt a lot, here's Trey Smith, who had a number of injury issues in college. So did Landon Dickerson, but Dickerson's is 3 ratings higher. Trey Smith is a better player than Landon Dickerson, but knowing what we know with Dickerson, I think it'd be foolish to give Trey Smith a long-term deal, but I do want him. So we're going to offer him 1 year for $26 million. I know that's a whole lot of money for an offensive guard, but it's only 1 year, only $7 million guaranteed. So if something were to happen, we could cut him, and it really wouldn't be that big of a loss. And this way we can figure out, can he stay healthy for a full season? And if he does, maybe we do pay him long term. Since we have so much money, losing that for this 1 year isn't that big of a deal. We still have $94 million to spend, some of which I plan on putting into Aaron Donald. The best interior defensive lineman of this generation and maybe all time. Talk about a perfect replacement for Fletcher Cox. I mean, going from Cox to Aaron Donald, one Hall of Famer to another. So he was asking for around $21 million, but to ensure we get him, I'm going to give him $28 million over 1 year. Again, I know it's a lot of money, but we have a whole lot of money to spend, so I'm willing to do it. And again, it's not some super long-term deal. $16.5 million of that deal is guaranteed. So we're putting in $54 million into 2 players, to be specific, 2 interior linemen. I get that's not the smartest use of money, but we have money to spend, and those are our 2 biggest needs, and we are upgrading at those 2 spots. But we're not done yet. Why not get another ring-chasing defensive lineman in J.J. Watt? I know he has a hard time staying healthy, and I know that's what I wanted to avoid, but we have plenty of talent on the defensive line, and J.J. Watt can be that last little boost. So even though we lost Fletcher Cox, hopefully we can have a defensive line that features Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt, Cleveland Ferrell, Jabari Achabe, Josh Uche. That's a nice little group of players who are all going after the quarterback. So those are the 3 big offers I'm going after. Aaron Donald, Trey Smith, and J.J. Watt. But there are a number of other depth players we're going after as well. And keep in mind, those big 3 are all on 1-year deals, so they're not super long-term. I also put bids in for Benny Snell, Caden Stearns, Courtney Pierce, who was already on our roster last year, Ernest Jones, Davion Nixon, DeMar Chancellor, Deontay Tyson, who was also on our team last year, along with Eddie Cruz and Eric Bolden. So we still have $36.5 million to spend. I thought about going after another big name, like, say, Jalen Waddle. I think a trio of Waddle, Smith, and Keon would be a lot of fun. But you also have to keep in mind, we have a ton of players we have to pay soon. Guys like Nehemiah Richardson, Tykeem Keon. I don't want to invest $20 million a year into 3 receivers. C.J. Thomas, Xander Vanderwall, if we do want to pay him. Those guys are all on the final year of their contracts. So as we simulate the first stage of free agency, we would get pretty much everybody. Unfortunately, we were unable to land Trey Smith. He ended up signing with Detroit, but we got pretty much everybody else, including Aaron Donald and J.J. Watt. So probably the 2 best defensive players of our generation are now both on our football team, Both of them are at the twilight of their careers, looking for their first Super Bowl rings because Aaron Donald does not have a ring yet in this series. Ernest Jones is the only other player who is not yet accepted. So we now have $68 million in cap space with Trey Turner not accepting. So I ended up going after Ryan Jensen instead. He's getting a lot of offers here in Stage 2. Nobody was going after him in the first stage of free agency, so I wish I went after him there, but hindsight's 2020. What are you going to do? So we're offering him 1 year, $17 million. Again, way more than his asking price, but it's 1 year. It's not a long-term commitment. And he's a really good player, 34 years old with guard flexibility. He would probably slide over to left guard, and that's where I think he would play next year. Simulating stage number 2, unfortunately, both Ernest Jones and Ryan Jensen would reject their contracts, so we do not land either of them on the team. We do have some fifth-year options now. Our assistant GM says Nehemiah Richardson does not deserve one because he was barely on the field, and when he was, he didn't play well. What? That does not make any sense. Nehemiah Richardson's one of the best corners in the National Football League. So this is a no-brainer. Obviously, we're going to take the fifth-year option, give us an extra year to make a long-term contract with us because obviously he is not going anywhere. Xander Vanderwall also has a fifth-year option, and I know it's a lot of money for quarterbacks, but we're going to take it because he's going to make a lot of money next year regardless, whether it's on the fifth-year option or a new extension. Unfortunately, the game did not give us an opportunity to give Tykeem Keon a fifth-year option, and Keon was a first-round pick. You need to be a first-rounder to get a fifth-year option, and we had 2 first-rounders in that very first draft, Nehemiah Richardson and Tykeem Keon. We traded for Xander Vanderwall, who was also a first-rounder, so they just didn't ask for Tykeem Keon to get one, which is kind of odd. So Keon's contract is up next year along with C.J. Thomas. Tyler Palumbo as well, our starting left tackle. So, yeah, not ideal, but Keon's going to get the big bucks, and it's probably going to be from us. That's why I did not want to pay Jalen Waddle. So there are a few offensive linemen left here who are pretty good. Andrew Norwell, Garrett Bowles, but I wasn't really interested in them. I would prefer to go to the trade market with them. So now we're going to talk about trades, not just for us, but around the rest of the league as well. There were a number of big moves made. So the first trade we have here is a major blockbuster. Dalvin Cook is headed to the Atlanta Falcons. The Vikings just drafted Chevelle Armonadou in the second round last year, and Dalvin Cook's on the final year of his contract, so they don't want to pay him long-term, but Atlanta is quite interested in him. The Falcons, despite winning 1 game last year, they were big spenders in free agency. They don't want to bring in a losing culture with new head coach Patrick Willis. They want to win football games. So the Vikings will be acquiring cornerback Griffin West, who is currently Atlanta's number 4 corner. He'll probably be Atlanta's number 5 corner after the draft, assuming they go with Kentucky's Bryson Barraclaw, number 1 overall. So they don't need Griffin West. The Vikings do. They just lost Darius Slay. Griffin West is Minnesota's new number 1 corner. The Vikings will also get a 3rd and a future 5th as well. Running backs are more valuable in this game in real life. That's why Dalvin Cook's going for a lot. Joey Bosa to the Giants for a 2 and a future 7th. This is pretty much the same package that the Chargers got in real life for Khalil Mack. And Joey Bosa in his career is pretty much what Khalil Mack is right now. Bosa is starting to regress a little bit. His play hasn't been what it used to be, but it's still really good. So Joey Bosa is now in our division. Not ideal. We've got a player-for-player swap here with the Chargers and the Jaguars. King Carver was a first-round pick 2 years ago, wide receiver, and linebacker T.K. Walker was a second-round pick a couple years ago. The Chargers need linebacker, the Jags need wide receiver, so there you go. The Chargers will also be getting 2 fifth-round picks from Jacksonville as well in the deal, so Walker and Carver now finally get an opportunity to start, because neither of them were going to start this year. Russell Ingram Jr. has been a little bit disappointing for the Titans. He only has 9 sacks in his first 3 years, so he is headed to the Los Angeles Rams. Ingram and the 78th pick are headed to LA for the 40th pick and 136. You might think that's not great value for the Titans, but Russell Ingram has been a bust for them so far, and he is on the final year of his contract. So this way he can get a new start in Los Angeles, and I think he's going to do really well there. Now it's time to talk about our trade situation. So as I said, I want to focus on the offensive line. I want to get our starting guard next year. There were 2 names who kind of enticed me. Kevin Dotson from the Steelers and Cesar Ruiz from the Saints. We're not going small here. We're really swinging for the fences. Of the 2 players, I prefer Cesar Ruiz, and I think the Saints would rather trade Cesar Ruiz than the Steelers with Kevin Dotson. Ruiz is the 11th ranked guard currently in the game. He's good. He's young. He's on the final year of his contract, which is why New Orleans is willing to move him. Dotson is also on the last year of his contract for what it's worth. But Cesar Ruiz has been better throughout his career than Kevin Dotson, and as I said, 2 years younger. Ruiz was a first-rounder about 5 years ago out of Michigan, and he's been a quality starter for New Orleans, but there is real reason for them wanting to trade him. However, the Steelers are not going to want to trade Dotson because he's their best offensive lineman. Their offensive line is not good. When you look at the Saints, Cesar Ruiz might be their least valuable offensive lineman. They have Ryan Ramczyk, who's a stud, Eric McCoy, who's a stud, Valescu Markovitz, who's a stud, and Clavon Samba, who's not the best, but he was just, what, the 11th overall pick in the draft last year? New Orleans gave up a ton to move up and get Samba, so they value him very highly. So of their 5 linemen, they value Cesar Ruiz the least. That, along with, again, that he's on the last year of his contract, I see why they would be willing to move him, because they're not going to be able to pay everybody. So I wanted to make a fair trade here, and I think this is pretty fair. They're going to get Eric Boyd, 23-year-old defensive lineman with star development, keep in mind. I think he'll have a better opportunity to develop in New Orleans than with us. So hopefully the former Metropolis Bulldog will have a successful NFL career. Marcus Davenport's on the final year of his contract, so if the Saints let him go next year, Eric Boyd could be the future starter there at defensive end. The Saints will also be getting a 4th-rounder this year, pick 116. We own 2 4th-rounders. That is our higher 4th-rounder. We also own 126. And they're going to get a future 5th as well. We will acquire Cesar Ruiz and a future 7th. You might argue that's a little bit lopsided towards us value-wise, but I think it's fair for New Orleans. They weren't going to pay Cesar Ruiz. They have 4 other really good offensive linemen. They have another young guard behind Cesar Ruiz who isn't spectacular, but worst comes to worst, they can start him and be fine. They're adding some solid draft capital. They're adding a young pass rusher in Eric Boyd. So I think it's a fair deal for both sides. Let's talk about free agency around the rest of the league. So Tom Brady did not sign anywhere for what it's worth. I imagine he's going to return to the Bucs. If not, somebody's going to be willing to pay him, but I would expect him to return to Tampa. Here are our signings. Of course, the big additions being Aaron Donald and J.J. Watt, both of them on short one-term deals, but hopefully they can be the final pieces to the puzzle, and we can win them their first championships as those two go down as 2 of the greatest defensive players ever. So I want to talk about the Lions real quick. They spent a whole lot of money. They signed David Bakhtiari, Trey Smith, Deontay Johnson, and Dyami Brown, and that's just on the offensive side of the ball. The Lions are going all in on their current core. They had plenty of money to spend. The Lions were the only team in their division not to make the playoffs last year, so I really like what they're doing. As I said earlier, the Atlanta Falcons are really trying to win some football games this year. They acquired Dalvin Cook, they signed Jalen Waddle, and they signed Kadarius Toney, really adding some weapons for quarterback Loco Onwuasu. Deshaun Elliott signs big money with the Vikings. Good for him. I hope he does well there. Trayvon Merrick signs with the Giants, so he is now in our division. The Giants, again, this offseason have been very aggressive as they try to get back into the playoff picture. Justin Simmons signs with Detroit. So the Lions signed Bakhtiari, Trey Smith, Justin Simmons, Deontay Johnson, Dyami Brown. The Lions are going to be really, really good next year. Rondale Moore signs a big deal with the Cleveland Browns. He'll be Russell Wilson's new #1 receiver. Ryan Jensen back to the Bucs. Travis Etienne to the Ravens. DJ Chark to the Chargers. That's why they traded away that other wide receiver, King Carver. The Bucs made a lot of moves. They signed Stephon Tuitt as well. Eddie Jackson to Dallas for really cheap. I thought about Eddie Jackson and seeing how much he got from a rival. I kind of wish I gave him that contract. I think he could have been really good for us at slot corner. Plenty of other moves around the league. A lot of big-time special teamers were free agents. The Bucs went out and signed Tua Tagovailoa. I still think they're going to try to bring back Brady as their starter next year, but I assume Tua is going to be the long-term replacement for Tom Brady, so he'll get mentored most likely by Brady going forward. Landon Dickerson to the Titans. I hope he does well there. Kenny Golladay stays in our division. He signs with Washington. And then going down the board here, Rob Gronkowski signs with the Titans. That's a weird one. And then Bobby Wagner, he's a Buccaneer. If you can't beat him, join him. I told you the Bucs made a lot of moves this offseason, and they're stealing one of our big key-time defensive players. Jameis Winston signed with the Rams. He'll be the backup, I assume, for Nico Cabanera. If things go poorly with Nico, which I really wouldn't be surprised, Jameis can come in and be the starter. So that's going to wrap up this episode. I think we had a really good free agency. We made some solid moves. I think Cesar Ruiz is going to be a great long-term addition. He's a player who I certainly plan on extending at the end of the year. And then on defense, we added Aaron Donald and J.J. Watt, the 2 best defensive players of this generation. We now have 6 starting X-Factors on our defense. Which three do you think we should have their zone abilities on for? I'm thinking Richardson, Donald, and Achebe. But let me know who you think we should do in the comments. Obviously, if Achebe gets injured again, we can always switch that to one of the other guys. So his injury history really wouldn't be a big deal there. So next episode is going to be the NFL Draft Preview, where we sort of go over what to expect for the draft. We do mock drafts, stuff like that. And then the following episode will be the NFL Draft itself. Currently, we own the 30th pick in the first round, along with a number of other picks scattered throughout. So that's going to wrap up the episode. I hope everyone enjoyed. Let me know what you thought of our free agency down below in the comments section. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Peace out.